Hey y'all, I'm finna go under.
Right. So you want to know about the extraterrestrials, yeah? This seems to be a very popular topic at the moment. So yeah, we're going to dive in. So people want to know about. I mean, you hear things like UFOs, UAPs now, yeah. But if we used to say IFO instead of UFOs, because UFO is unidentified flying objects, yeah. But you're looking at it and identifying it. So obviously we changed that to identified flying objects. That's what they should really be called. But over time, the term that most people are familiar with now is UAP, which is unidentified aerial phenomenon, right? So we're going to get into obviously extraterrestrials. We say extra, yeah, terrestrial, because we know that the word extra means additional or added to. Terrestrial comes from the word terra or the word terrain, which deals with the planet Earth. In fact, one of the names for the planet Earth in ancient times was Terra. And the terrain deals with the terrain. And when you say opposite to terrestrial, it's really celestial, which deals with the heavens above, the sky, etc. So anything that's extra on the terrain or the planet Terra is known as extraterrestrial. So all of these terms and names is relating to the different beings and entities. So what we're going to cover today is the extraterrestrial species and how the people on the planet, how the races relate to these extraterrestrials. Now, what's actually interesting is that now that it's becoming a popular subject, everybody's jumping on it. But if you look at any books and scrolls that Pana Babylon, the master teacher, Dr. Malachi Z. put out, he's the only person from the get-go that came saying, I'm an extraterrestrial from another planet called Risk, right? Planet Risk, spelled like this. And back then, everybody was like, you're crazy, ridicule, laughing. But look at all the posters. Every poster you ever see him with, see a craft in the background. Look at this one, craft. Go back and look at all the books that he has actually put out. He would always have crafts or him coming down from a craft. And so, there's a book put out called The Man from Planet Risk, yeah, which is now becoming The Man from Planet Risk. And this book is so popular, not only because it was talking about him being an extraterrestrial from the planet Risk, but he was giving out information about different extraterrestrials on the planet and how they've had an involvement with the government, etc., and giving out information about many projects that were going on at the time, which many people were unfamiliar with. But we're going to dive into the different species of extraterrestrials. We're going to start off with these, right? These are called the Deros, and the leader of the Deros is known as Yabahan. All right, Yabahan, that's him, right? The Deros is a group of insane cave dwellers, and they were called the Sumerian, meaning the obese ones, or Samin, and the Abanderos, or as they are called today, Deros, which is a combination of the words detrimental and robots. That's where you get the word Deros from, because two parts, detrimental and robot. These Sumerian or Deros really exist. Their chief is known as Yabahan, as I mentioned before. The Sumerians are constantly in conflict with the group of beings called the Duanis, who hold the same belief that they too will take over the planet one of these days, like the planet Earth. They are born by hatching from eggs that are 4 to 6 feet in diameter. Never before you're going to get such detail about these different extraterrestrial species here on the planet. All right, so they grow to 7 feet and are extremely obese. The Deros, who live in the caves, are degenerated so much that they don't have much intelligence. They have 2 stomachs, and their digestive system is the same as that of a cow. Deros and cows both chew the curd, which means that when they eat, they chew their food and it goes through the initial stages of digestion where it reaches a large sac that is before the true stomach. The food is then regurgitated to the mouth for further chewing. This is called chewing the curd. The Deros have no fingernails, no toenails, nipples, navel, or rectum. Their eyes are silver grey and they glow in the dark. They have blonde eyebrows and a pinkish grey colour skin, much like the corpse of a Caucasian and a pig, having not been exposed to the inner or outer sun. Other than their eyebrows, they have no hair on their bodies because of a disease called pectitulum mania, not easy to pronounce, and are responsible for the disease known as trichinosis and trichiniasis. They have no teeth. Their mouth appears to be full of a gummy, slimy substance. They are nocturnal and hear extremely well. They're not very peaceful and have a strong dislike for human beings. They are very human in appearance, yet far from it. Their noses are long, trunk-like, which is very similar to that of an elephant. They contend that the planet Earth was theirs originally and will be theirs again one day. Many people today who are obese are descendants of the Deros. You know, you can see people that are very, very overweight. We're not talking about just the normal average weight, but people that are like, you know, have serious weight problems and weigh over 300 pounds and more. It is not normal for human beings. It is obviously a hereditary glandular problem and is caused by overactive glands. Certain endocrine glands disorders such as hyperthyroidism or tumors of the adrenal gland, pancreas, or pituitary gland can cause obesity.
I've seen it before when I was looking up Inky now. This is not my first time seeing them.
The next extraterrestrial species, known as the Theros, which is slightly different from the Deros. These are the Theros, and you know that's Lamsa. All right, let's get into about the Theros. The Theros, which is short again from integrative or constructive, are a subsurface race that usually keep the Deros in check. The Theros were the original tribe of the Lunarians who came to this planet to dwell beneath the surface of the Earth. They are referred to as the Sunanans, meaning the yearly ones. The Deros were for disagreeable people and the Theros were for agreeable people. Their chief name is Lamsa. The Theros came from the planet Jomon, right? So Jomon is spelled J-O-M-O.
Yeah.
Right, that's the planet they came from. From Jomon in the star constellation known as AQUARIUS, which is in the Boots constellation. Arcturus, the red giant, the fourth brightest star in the heaven, is where much mixing took place. So the Sunayanans have 48 chromosomes instead of the normal 46 that humans have on the Earth. The Theros chromosome structure is so different from Earthlings that when mixed with certain humans, it caused a defect of 47 chromosomes, which today is called Down syndrome. Down syndrome can be found in all races of the planet Earth. For every 800 children out of 1,000 children are being born on Earth has this trait, Down syndrome. Their children are usually born with breathing defects as well as congenital heart disease, and they also have poor digestive systems. Their immune system is unable to function properly, and they are more apt to developing leukemia. The Theros that have an abundance of pigmentation in their skin are descendants of the Shuyuk. Those who are lacking in pigmentation are descendants of the Halibines, the Flugerods, or the Hulu. The Theros bored further into the earth and were able to keep their sanity. Because of crossbreeding, the Theros took on different forms, and others look so human they can come to the surface and not be noticed. And you notice they made a movie called The Coneheads, and you know showed beings that look like them. Right, we're gonna keep going. These are the Anunnaki, right? So with the Anunnaki, where a lot of people are talking about the Anunnaki, right? This is what they look like. So from the top you've got Nagal, then you've got Ninki, in the middle, top, then you have Erishkigal, then you have Ninti, Enlil, Ishtar, and Enki.
Yeah.
Right? So everybody's familiar with
I researched this before.
We're going to go into who the Anunnaki are. The Anunnaki, also referred to in the biblical scripts as Elohim, are those beings who were sent down to the planet Ki, Earth, known to you as angels. The word Ki, that's another name for the planet Earth as well, all right? So the word Anunnaki means those who Anu sent from heaven to earth. They are called Nitiru, meaning guardians, by the Egyptians. The Anunnaki / Elohim are the mighty ones. In Ashuric, Syriac, Arabic, the mighty ones are referred to as the Jabarims. All right. In Aramic, Hebrew, they're known as the mighty ones, are referred to as the Giborim. The very elite among the Anunnaki are called the Denir or the Dingir, meaning the righteous or divine ones of the rocket ship, or Ilu, meaning the lofty ones in Akkadian. The Anunnaki, Elohim, were acting as intermediaries between Earth and Nibiru. They came to the planet Earth in order to find gold and other resources to take back to their planet, which is in the 8th planet Risk, or of the 19th galaxy called Ilion, meaning on high, which was on its way to destruction due to constant rays of the three suns, because the three suns were known as Utu, Atsu, and Shamash. They were supposed to deliver the processed gold to spaceships that will be stored on the dark side of the moon, called Kingu or Shishki, and Lahu, Mars. This is where they constructed and loaded the 30-mile-long cylinder-shaped craft. They used Lahu, Mars, to assemble crafts to launch. The Anunnaki arrived on the planet Earth by passenger crafts called Shams. Their planet-sized ship Nibiru, which means planet which crosses the skies, or planet of the crossing, right? It travels at ridiculous speeds per second, which is at the speed of light. Nibiru is about 2.5 to 3 times the size of the planet Earth. Nibiru has a crystal dome, giving it the ability to break down light. It has solar panels that are the size of pinheads or less, that can actually generate millions and millions of watts of energy, as tiny as a pinhead is. Nibiru was set up for holographic interdimensional transport and manned over 144,000 crew members, headed by 24 elite beings called Yahwehs, 12 agreeable and 12 disagreeable. Nibiru is also called Ukaba, meaning the movable throne. These extraterrestrials are aboard the mothership Nibiru. The Anunnaki's descriptions are dark, greenish, brown skin, olive toned beings with supreme 9 ether hair texture, or what you would call kinky or kingly hair. They look like humans with a few exceptions, such as their eyes. Some of the Anunnaki's eyes are exceptionally larger than that of humans. They are of such an advanced state that if you confronted one of them with a weapon, they would let you shoot them rather than hurt you, right? And again, of course, now we're learning more about the Natharu, slightly different from the Anunnaki, which we'll go into a bit later. So, next, we're going to look at the beings from Procyon or Procyon, beings from Poseidon. Some say Procyon or Poseidon. You've got 2 different types, right? You've got those of the Ashtar command, beings from Pleiades, okay? All right, let's look into them. The Procyonians are originally from Poseidon, or Procyon, depending on how you pronounce it. Their height ranges from 7 to 9 feet. Their skin texture is human-like, and their complexion is brown to albino, as well as their hair that's woolly brown or blonde and straight. The Procyonians have traits that are very similar to the humans, such as the head, face, nose, mouth, neck, body, which is very muscular. Their arms, which are also very muscular, feet, hands, torso, and they have strong legs. Their eyes are also similar to humans. There are 2 races, as I pointed out, all right? The elder's eye color ranges from black to hazel, and the second race's eye color ranges from blue to grey. The male have very large sex organs, and the females are very developed or voluptuous. They say to humans that they are the earth children. They want to communicate with earthlings and try to understand human emotions. They breed or they bred primitive human beings, thus Cro-Magnon. The man came about. They have the ability to travel within time frames. They depend on beam crafts for interstellar travel. The Procyonians astrally travel from place to place as a natural function. The name of their home planet of the Procyon is translated as those who travel through time. The word Procyon is a Latin word from the Greek word procyon, which literally means before the dog. It is called this because it rises before the star Sirius, or the dog star. The Ashtar fleet. The Ashtar fleet, also called Ashtar Command, are originally from the Aldebaran constellation. The Ashtar Command are among many entities that come to Earth and have been circling above the planet Earth, for the most part invisible to the naked eye, since the early 1950s AD. Their height ranges from 5 to 6 feet. They are humanoid and have less water in their bodies and are pasty looking in appearance. The color of their skin is very pale and is rubbery. They have blonde hair. Their heads and eyes are similar to humans. The color of their eyes are blue or grey. They say they are here to help save the planet Earth. They communicate through speech Their leader is Ashtar Sharan, who is also a Rusiak. These blue-eyed, blonde-haired beings came to the planet Earth and are still here on the planet Earth. They have been known to wear insignias from Arcturus and Venus. You may see an insignia, it's like having a logo here, and it may confuse you because some of these beings are sharing planets, since they were cast out of the 19th galaxy, Ilion, that which encompasses Hades. And you can read about that from other scrolls the masters put out, like are there UFOs, extraterrestrials in your midst, and extraterrestrial in creation, which is scroll number 136. Okay, so
sunglasses.
Wow.
My accessory.
Glad I researched.
Mixing it up with different styles, with a little drama. Whenever I have changed my outfit,
Pray to protect y'all and whoever y'all going help. I say.
Sunglasses, own your moment.
For you save days are here. Find hot deals throughout the store and earn 4 times the points.
On this ship, you represent this royal majesty, so dress accordingly.
We're going to move on now to the Shield or the Riskians, right? So these are the scientists, all right, known as the Riskians or the Shield. And Yanun, yeah, he's the one that's been sent here to break the spell of ignorance known to us as part of Yanun. All right, so let's go into a brief description and their history. Okay, so the Shield, meaning the elders, are descendants of the Riskians who dwell within the caverns beneath the planet Earth. They were originally called the Riskians, who originally left the planet Risk and took residence in Shambhala, but eventually had to set up their own cavern. The Shuyuk are the elders, and the master teacher says that I have taught you of their existence before in other books. I'm just giving you another name for them. They are the Riskians from the planet Risk in the 19th galaxy, Ilion. I told you in Man from Planet Risk, which is scroll number 80, that we, the Riskians, are able to manipulate our DNAs and RNAs, so that we can live to be hundreds of years old. However, we don't age like you. Our time is different. On the planet Earth, from the moment you're born, you are dying. Unlike humans, we know that death is an illness. You just refuse to accept that death has a cure or can be prolonged. He's broken that now with the telomeres that, this is how you can extend your life. The telomeres are at the end of your chromosomes, right? We know the secrets to life and death. We have the ability to speak any language, and we communicate telepathically. We communicate in tones. A Riskian's body is always vibrating at a certain tone, which we use to communicate, and when frustrated, we learn to tune in on a certain tone to bring down the vibration of the body and just focus on one tone. You, the Melanonite children, are our descendants. As I begin to describe what we look like, you will see that we are your forefathers. We have dark reddish brownish skin wild on the planet Earth, and green olive tone skin wild on our planet, the planet Risk. Our overall appearance is that of a human being, yet you sense something distant in our eyes. We have very dark pupils, slightly slanted, and can be slightly larger than humans. Our hair is silver, white to black, and wavy. Our height ranges from 5 to 7 feet. Our skin textures are similar to the humanoids and tends to dry up and shine. We have normal sized human heads and faces, some with facial hair and some without. We have long noses and normal human jaws, mouth and ears, which sometimes are smaller than the normal body and normal teeth. Riskians are tall and slender with square shoulders, normal arms and hands that have 5 fingers. Our genitals are similar to humans. We have short torso and long legs with normal feet. Our overall appearance is that of a human being. We have a stern but kind and loving nature. We are the parents of Nubians on the planet Earth and father of the ancient Sumerians, Egyptians, and various cultures of South America. All right, we're going to go on to the nomos. Right, these are the nomos, yeah, and singular is nomo when you're saying one person. When there's plural, is nomos with the S at the end, right? So you got the twin sister, Yuruku, yeah, and then you have Amo, so you have Nomo, twin sister, and then you have Amo and Yuruku. Right, let's go into what they're about. So the nomos, on April 23rd, 1994 AD, the stars Sirius A and Sirius B crisscrossed in front of each other, which only happens every 9,000 years. Energies were shot down to the planet Earth to rejuvenate the Dogons. The Dogons are a tribe that live in Mali, who received their name from the Dogon beings, who came from the star Sirius. The Dogons have recorded the Sirius information given by the Nomos long ago. Nomo is an individual and Nomos is the plural. The Nomos were amphibious creatures known as the reptilians. The name Nomos means the masters of the water, also called instructor or the monitors. The Nomos have to live in the water. The Dogons record the landing of Nomo on the planet Earth as the day of the fish, and the planet he came from in the Sirius system is known as the pure earth of the day of the fish. The Nomos landed in an ark. The ark landed on the earth to the northeast of Dogon country, which is the direction of Egypt and the Middle East. The Dogon claim they have come from originally before coming to Mandi. The Dogon described the landing of the ark as the word of Nomo, which was cast down by him in the four directions as he descended. And it sounded like the echoing of four large stone blocks being struck with stones by the children. The Nomo is said to be the monitor for the universe, the father of mankind, guardian of its spiritual principles, dispenser of rain and master of the water. Not all the Nomos came to earth. The one called Nomo died, or the great Nomo remained in the skies or heavens with Anna, and he is his vicar. He manifests himself in the rainbow, which is called Path of the Nomo. He is the guardian of the spiritual principles of living creatures on earth. Every 60 years, the Dogon, they hold a ceremony called the Sigu ceremony. Its purpose is the renovation of the world, right? The Dogons are African populace who comprehend various information of the stars. They conceive that the planets revolve around the sun just as we do. They keep in constant contact with the reptilian. The reptilian is considered a god. His name is Nomo because of his power. His power is predominantly telepathy, dominating someone else's mind, and his capabilities such as ascending to the skies. The Dogons are a primitive tribe or highly scientific. So again, now most people know that they mapped, Sirius A and B way before there were telescopes and people, European scientists getting to know about them. We're going to move on to the Donakil. Okay, so we already did the video on Yakub. If you haven't seen that already, go and watch that because Yakub was a product of the Donakil and their Keros. Okay, so this is what they look like. And their leader is known as Fukwa. Alright, let's go into the Donakil. The Donakil, the center of the planet Earth, is a special base controlled by benevolent beings called the Donakil, whose original home is Risk. The Donakil have 9 ether hair texture and Nubian features. They also possess a peculiar sized brain in comparison to yours. They are approximately 5 feet to 7 feet tall. They are agreeable, having a very kind and peaceful nature. They reside in the city of Shambhala. Their chief, or the chief of the Donakil, is Fukwa. The Donakil never exited the caverns of the earth to become surface dwellers. Many of the dissatisfied amongst them came to the surface, but of their seeds did these tribes of beings come: the Nubian of the Donakil and the Anglo-Saxons of the Flugerons. The Donakil settled throughout the continent of Africa and became known as what is called today the Dongala or the Donogala tribe of northern Sudan, and spread as far as down as northern Ethiopia, which is Ether, Utopia. The Melanite being referred to as the Donakil of today are descendants of these benevolent beings who dwell in the center of the earth called Donakil. The Donakil are the original people of Havila, same as the Dongolawe tribe of the Fuzzy Wuzzy. They are the same tribe and people, your original family. The Donakil migrated south and lived amongst the tribes of Kush. Thus, you have amongst the tribe of Donakil people with round faces, round eyes, and round noses. They were both the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Dan, which you find, of course, in the 12 tribes of Israel that were destroyed, and then Judah and Dan were the ones that survived, who migrated with them and became known as the Falashas after their entry into Ethiopia, which both tribes became the the Danakil. Alright, so we're going to move on to the Duanis. Right, so let's have a look at a brief history about them. The Duanis are among the different beings that live beneath the surface of the planet Earth. Right, they are also called leprechauns or gnomes or dwarfs, and the legends of them has come. Their mixture with the Earthlings produced defective DNA. I met the chief of the Duani. His name was Sinclair. He could recite Shakespeare. You know, the Duanis master surface information and study intensely such writings by Shakespeare and other fine arts. They aspire to be like the elite of the human race, yet have no interest in coexisting with human beings. Of the Canis Major constellation, they are 4 feet tall and they look like porcupines, meaning their hair sticks straight up. 90% of their bodies covered with hair. They suffer from a disorder called hirsutism. The covering of their body is with thick hair. Alright, we're going to move on to the Dracos or Dracos. Right, these are the different types of reptilians. Right, so you've got Hatton, yeah. You've got a different one like the creature from the Black Lagoon, the reptilians, and different types of reptilians there. All right, let's go into Draco. All right, the Dracos are originally from the sixth sun constellation Orion. They range from 6 to 9 feet. They have a dark green to dark brown skin tone. Their skin texture is scaly. They have no hair on their bodies, and around their heads is pulsing glow. They have almond-shaped eyes. They're glowing red. Their nose is more recognizable than the greys. Their mouths are small slits, and they have no ears. They have a hole in the back of their neck from which mucus is excreted. Their arms are long and thin, reaching just above their knees. On their hands, there are 3 webbed fingers and a thumb. Their torso protrudes and their chest have winged appendages supported by long ribs. Their legs are long and skinny. Their feet are more human in appearance. They have some vestigial reproductive capabilities. The Draconian group is a confederation. They are the reptilian humanoids with the subgroups, and these are the serpent race from Sirius of the constellation Canis Minor of the 16th galaxy. There is a conflict of control between a covert species known as the Meldekian and the Draconian linked cultures and the Orion link. Then you have the gargoyles. The gargoyles are another type of reptilian. The male gargoyles have wings and are called Valkyries. The humanoid species are male, so the humanoid species and male have the ability to fly and are the breeders. These beings are aggressive in nature. Yeah? They eat animals, humans, and drink human blood. They are emotionless and do not fully comprehend emotions. Some of the hybrid species that have crossbred with the reptilian species have full reproduction capabilities. Okay, we're going to go on to the beings, the predator, and the Syrians, or what people call shaggies, right? So this is a predator being, looks exactly like the one from the movie, and you can see the Syrians beings from Orion, okay? We have a scroll actual fact called P.4, which we can also post for you to get to know more about these predator beings. Right, so the predators are beings from the galaxy of Andromeda. Their appearance are grasshopper-like, predator-looking creatures. When the reptilians captured the Romardians and took control of them, the beings from Andromeda were working alongside with the reptilians and captured some of the Romardians as well and started breeding their own race of greys, which in time led to a breed of mean, vicious, bug-eyed beings. When the energy field of the planet Risk was starting to increase and the whole was starting to lose color, the Riskians had to abort their planet and go to Orion to get closer to the Milky Way. So they moved to Mars, Lami, where they set up a commune, laboratories inclusive when they went to Orion. The Zeta Reticulians who lived in Orion did not want the Riskians to live in the Orion constellation because they were taken over. The Riskians aborted Orion and went to Aldebaran in
What do you mean? I had opportunity to and I didn't.
And I wasn't going to waste them.
Balancing life, work, and school was tough, but I'm confident.
Level up with a nursing degree from Capella University. What can't you do? Clean guaranteed, burn optional. Choose the intensity that's right for you.
Wash your mouth with new Listerine. The best.
You could be anywhere when your identity gets stolen. Equifax can help you stay back.
The Taurus constellation, right? Some went to Taurus in the Boots constellation, while others went even as far as Andromeda. The beings from Andromeda, along with the beings from Regal and the Aldebaran, attacked and defeated the Riskians because the Riskians were not warriors, right? These beings are the same extraterrestrial beings that came to the planet Earth in the year 1952 AD to visit the US president, who at the time was Harry S. Truman. However, Truman could not handle the appearance of these beings, so the beings from Aldebaran, the humanoids, came to represent them. Again, you can find this in the scroll Extraterrestrial and Creation, which is scroll number 136. The Sirians, referred to as Shaggies, the Sirians are beings from the Sirius constellation, planet Iduma. The Sirians range from 7 to 9 feet in height. They have dark brown to pink skin, and their skin texture is very similar to humans, but it's hard to detect because it's under a thick coat of straight hair. The shape of their, or fur should I say, the shape of their heads are broad and big like apes. Their eyes come in variations, black, brown, and the pupils are much like apes. Their nose, however, is wide with a small point at the tip. The jaws of the Sirians are hard to see because it is covered with fur. The mouth is broad, yet they have very thin lips. Their ears are large and round. Their arms are extremely long and muscular, and their bodies are also very muscular. The fingers are long with a short thumb. They have long torsos and short muscular legs. They have genitals similar to humans. Their toes are long except for the big toe. They appear to be very ape-like. Only you can see the intelligence in their eyes. The Sirians are vegetarians, although some have been known to be meat eaters. They are non-aggressive towards humans and try to avoid human contact. They make grunting sounds, roar, and they can even speak. Right, we come to your favorite, the greys, which most people are familiar with or know, right? So you have different species of greys, and there are different mixtures. Some are hybrids, and so you've got the greys, which most people are familiar with. Then you've got the Meldekians, and you have, the beings from Reticulum, Maccabians, and Echelon, all right? So let's get into who they are. So, the greys, there are over 70 different species of greys, and more every day with the hybrids, etc. Alright, and the greys are really a crossbreed or crossbred between humans and reptilian species. The greys are being used as slaves by the reptilians. The most common species are the Rumadians, who are benevolent. The Reticulans, Narians, are malevolent. The Maccabians, malevolent. The Rumadians are biological entities, right? Referred to as EBEs. Biological entities grafted from various extraterrestrial species. They served one purpose, and that was explorers and worthy servants, right? They were used by the Anunnaki for the purpose of exploring gold. They transported gold back to Nibiru and then risked. When the job was completed, they were given their freedom. Some of them chose Pleiades and Arcturus as their home, where the malevolent Luciferian type reptilians chose to conquer them, enslaving them, performing biological experiments, creating hybrid. The Maccabians are a biogeneric breed from the cow and other species here on Earth, as well as mechanical and computerized technologies. Their skin colors are greyish blue and the texture is smooth. The Maccabians are a mixture of the Rumadians and the reptilians. When the reptilians captured the benevolent Rumadians, they used the cow's nervous system to breed the malevolent Macarians. The grey beings have been abducting humans for many centuries. They see Earth as a big farm and have been basically raising and grooming humans to take them back to their home planet. The Zeta Reticulians are divided into social classes, one being hawkish, being more hawkish than the other. The more peaceful of the two appears more reclined and has demonstrated a more tolerant attitude towards humans. The other class is more abrupt, blunt and crude towards humans. One in particular are the Reticulans Narians. They use sex, pain, drugs and fear subliminally as obsessive elements with which they influence humans. The Reticulans Narians are originally from Zeta Reticuli. They are 4.5 feet tall with grey smooth skin. They have no hair on their thin bodies. They have pear-shaped heads with big faces consisting of large black eyes with no pupils, a very small nose and a small slit-like mouth. They have long necks that can stretch the length of their arms. They are normal in size, including their hands that have 5 fingers. They have a small torso with no stomach, so they absorb nutrients through their skin. They have legs normal to their body length. They have fully developed sexual organs. Their feet are much like a monkey's, yet their appearance is more like humans. They are aggressive in nature and also show fear of humans. They can communicate by speaking any language. They also communicate telepathically. Alright, so the Flugerods, yeah, and that's their leader, known as Korg. Alright, so let's find out more about the Flugerods. The Flugerods were the original Nordics before they crossbred with different races to acquire the appearance they possess presently. They are the originators of the Nordic race and live in a cavern beneath the Antarctic. Their chief is named Korg. The original Halabites, meaning to blush, or Hulum, Flugerods, became known as the Neanderthals, or simply cavemen, eating raw flesh, running around on 4s, and living in a state of bestiality. They found their way into the inner caverns of the planet. Many of them took residence, while others in time used the technology and terrorized other innocent tribes. This seed moved behind the Caucasus Mountains and up into Russia and became known as the Khazars, and the woolly-haired 7 Ether Orientals of this seed were called the Asiatic. They were known as the Safran or Safradini Jew. These are the grafted devils that Yakub created. Remember, we already mentioned, we did the video how Yakub created these beings. They are your Flugerods, original Khazars, and your Asiatic Ashkenazims. Their symbol being the universe, the moon called Umar, also Kamar, the sun and the bright morning star. They use the crescent moon and the pentagram, that is the 5-pointed star. This pale man or Halabine Flugerod should not be confused with the albino seed, the cursed Canaanites, meaning lowlanders, the descendants of Canaan and or Canaan of 4,000 years ago, before 2,000 years ago. So Canaan or Canaan was like 6,000 years ago. The Caucasians, who have blonde hair and blue eyes, are descendants from the Flugerods. These Flugerods now live in a cavern beneath the Antarctic. They are the father of the Nordic race, not to be confused with the Canaanites, whose leprosy is the result of a curse of a defective genes passed down to him from his mother Anis, who was an Anakite. Remember, the Flugerods produce extremely low levels of melanin, and your Canaanites also produce low levels of melanin. Both are melanin recessive. So the Flugerods is going back before the Canaanites, but they go back to like 8,400 years ago, whilst, the Canaanite or Canaanites only 6,000 years ago when you count backwards. Alright, so that's the Flugerod. That's just a...
Dang, Gina,
Breathe your own
dang.
sunshine and gradually step into
Oh my
Dig
goodness.
It with Jergens Natural Glow.
With LinkedIn, you can sell, market, and hire for your small business all in one place.
Are you joining this call?
Oh, shoot.
Who's joining right now?
The painful shingles rash can last for weeks and could disrupt work.
small section of the many species of extraterrestrial beings. So when you look on the planet today, everyone you see on the planet, every root race has ties with their extraterrestrial ancestors. So you look at the different heights that people have on the planet and the composition of their bodies, their head shapes, their eyes, their nose, you can actually line them up with which genes or genetics of extraterrestrial have become a part of their makeup. So on the planet, you have the root races or the oldest races being proven now by everyone to be that the Africans, known as the Homo naledi and the Homo habilis, and that ties in with the beings on the planet that go back to the Parnatharu and those that came down here and became known as the Pataites or the little beings. And you can see how the relationship between those short beings, who were literally initially just 4 feet and 5 inches and 5 feet 4 for the males, you see how on the planet today, to get taller beings is where these other extraterrestrial beings came and mixed with those to produce different heights on the planet. So when you hear about the Nephilims or the giants or these Anunnaki beings that came down here, this is where that mixture comes in. You have people on the planet, for example, who, so that's, let me just come back to the point I was about to make. You have people on the planet who are then like, let's say the Asians, right? Which again, the anthropologists will refer to as the Denisovan or the Homo florensis. Now these will be your Asians, and you look at the beings from Teros or from Jomon, right? When we talk about Jomon, those beings will relate to those beings on the planet. Then obviously you have like the Caucasians, which are referred to as the Cro-Magnon or the Neanderthal, who are related to the beings from, say, the Pleiades or the Ashtar command. And these are the beings that a lot of the times when Europeans say they've been abducted or they've met and spoken with extraterrestrials, that's who you see. They show you their leader, you know, Sharon, who was, again, the Ashtar command were the ones that were in contact with Hitler, etc., right? And then on the planet, you have many of these extraterrestrial beings that came and lived in the caverns. You have those that stay up in the sky, but they're in places and they're literally invisible to the naked eye. And so you've got beings that are in the waters. And you look at beings like, in terms of the traits, like those people that are really obese. You know, there are people that, when they say obese, we're talking about like it said in the in that scroll, beings that are like 300 pounds or more. There have been shows on TV where people are in bed, they can't get out of the house. You know, they have to take them out through the window using cranes and things like that. That's the type of level of obesity we're talking about. And no matter what they do, they can't lose weight because they're tied to those Deros beings. You know, the ones with the trunk-like nose, like the elephants. So then you've got beings on the planet who have a lot of hair. You know, they have hair like all over their faces and so on. And this will tie into a lot of the Enkiduites. And they suffer from something known as hirsutism, which again ties into the Duanis, who have hair all over their bodies. You can keep going and look at many traits on the planet from humans, and you can line it up to the extraterrestrials that have come here and have been living here and walking amongst us and living amongst us. Now, Parna Babylon was, in fact, I've never seen or heard anybody else go into as much detail about these species of extraterrestrials and how it ties into the races on the planet and the fact that he's an extraterrestrial. No other teacher came on the scene saying they were an extraterrestrial. But back then, when he was teaching this information, in fact, that comes from the calendar. Yeah, this goes back to, this is published in 1996. So today you see a lot of people talking about extraterrestrials and the orbs, and you know, it's getting more and more to the point where these extraterrestrials are going to start to be more visible. Many people have seen the Shaggies, you know, and it's going to become more and more prevalent for people to see or meet, or they're going to expose themselves. You're seeing crafts now. So yeah, we wanted to do this video just to remind people that, you know, this information is something that we've been teaching for years. But it's just that now everybody's on it. We wanted to give you more details and give you some of these extraterrestrial species and their relationship to the planet and the people on the planet that are walking amongst us. Some of these extraterrestrials have had offspring, children, you know, that are amongst us, and they look very human like we do. Of course, you also have the, you know, beings that are what you call androids, or they're machine and, you know, mixture between humanoids and machines. And they showed you a movie called Ex Machina a long time ago, and again, if you watch that, it goes into what I'm talking about, where robots, remember now, Elon Musk and people like that are actually putting out robots. But remember that when you first start off, the robots are going to be more mechanical. They're not going to be as advanced. But as time goes on, they're going to make them to the point where you can't tell the difference. Especially with AI now. AI is giving them artificial intelligence. So what we're saying is you might be seeing the robots of today looking like robotic and moving, you know, in a very kind of awkward way. But with more advancement in technology, you're not going to be able to tell the difference. And that's what that movie, Ex Machina, was basically showing us. So yeah, I hope that's giving you a taste of the different species of extraterrestrials. And yeah, until the next time, we'll look forward to answering more of your questions.
Wow.
People use their eyes and allowing them to get back to their normal level of functioning, and that's something that's really special.
Wow, what y'all think about that? Yeah, so they've been here, so they ain't just coming here. Okay, they're gonna show themselves, which they're allowed to. We just have to all try to get along. That's gonna be the thing. Oh shoot.
Before the world.
That's gonna be the thing. Okay. Let's see. Ancient Beast. What is this one?
I'm not kidding.
Okay, let's see what this is.
In a storage room beneath the University of Pennsylvania Museum, a fragment of clay sits on a shelf where almost no one sees it. It is around the size of a human hand. The cuneiform across its surface was pressed into wet clay around 2200 BCE, then baked in the Mesopotamian sun. For most of the 20th century, scholars labeled the text a religious hymn, a piece of cosmological poetry, nothing literal, nothing real. But in 1962, a German Assyriologist began retranslating the fragment line by line, and what he found stopped his work for a full week before he could continue. The scribe was not writing metaphor. The scribe was describing, in the same matter-of-fact tone used for grain inventories and irrigation records, an ocean that existed above the sky, and the things that swam inside it. However, what came next in the translation was the part he did not publish for another 7 years. The fragment is part of the Nippur collection, the largest single body of Sumerian text ever recovered. Nippur was the religious capital of southern Mesopotamia. It was the place where the priesthood kept their oldest archives, their most precious tablets, their inheritance from a civilization that, according to their own records, had been taught everything it knew by beings who descended from the sky. When American archaeologists excavated the temple library at the end of the 19th century, they hauled out thousands upon thousands of clay fragments. Many were broken. Many were stacked in jars, layered in mud, scorched by ancient fires. The collection was so large that it has still not been fully translated, more than 130 years after it was unearthed. Tablets are still being deciphered today. The fragment in question carries a number, not a name, CBS 11572. 3 lines down from the top edge, the scribe introduces the subject. He writes that above the firmament, above the great dome that holds back the waters, there is another sea. He calls it the Upper Apsu, mirroring the term Sumerians used for the fresh water deep below the earth. The Lower Apsu was where the god Enki lived. The Upper Apsu, according to this tablet, was something else entirely. The scribe says it is wider than any sea a man has crossed. He says its waters do not move like ordinary water. He says that those who watch the dome at night sometimes see the things inside it. And then he begins to describe them. The description is not casual. The scribe writes with the same precision a Mesopotamian merchant would use to record the contents of a grain shipment. He gives counts. He gives sizes. He gives the part of the sky in which each shape was first observed. He notes whether the observation happened during the dry season or the rainy season. He records the name of the priest who was on duty at the temple of Enlil that night, a man called Lugal Banda, whose name appears in 3 other tablets from the same period as a sky watcher of high reputation. This is the kind of detail that survives in administrative records, not in religious poetry. Whoever wrote CBS 11572 was not crafting a myth. He was copying down what his predecessors had logged and what he himself was instructed to log. This is the section that gets called poetry in standard translations. It is also the section where, if you set the poetic interpretation aside and read it as the scribe wrote it, the imagery becomes specific to a degree that poetry rarely is. He describes creatures that have no fins but move forward without effort. He describes shapes that catch the light of the moon and reflect it like polished bronze. He describes things that travel in groups, then split apart, then rejoin in patterns the scribe says no fisherman has ever seen in any river or sea. Standard interpretation calls this symbolic language for stars, but stars do not split apart and rejoin. Stars do not catch light. Stars produce their own. The deeper problem is the next passage. The scribe writes that, on certain nights, when the dome thins, one of these creatures passes through. He does not say it falls. He does not say it descends as a god would descend. He says it passes through, the way a fish passes from one pool into another when the channel opens. And he says that when it passes through, the priests of Nippur are required to record where in the sky it was seen, how long it remained, and which direction it moved when it left. What the German Assyriologist's unpublished notes describe in detail is the part of the fragment most translators have softened or skipped entirely. He sets the cuneiform transliteration in one column, his own English rendering in the next, and the standard published translation in the third. The differences between the second and third columns are not minor. Where the standard reading offers vague poetic phrasing, his version gives concrete nouns. Where the standard reading uses gods as the subject of a sentence, his rendering uses the Sumerian word for thing or creature. In the margin of one page, he writes that the conventional translation was constructed to fit the academic expectation of what a religious tablet should say. The fragment itself, in his judgment, said something else. It said what it appeared to say. And what it appeared to say did not match anything the modern world was prepared to accept from a Bronze Age scribe. And before we go further, I need to pause for a second, because what I am about to tell you gets significantly stranger. And I realized a while ago that some of this cannot be fully explained in a video format. The complete decoding of the tablet, all 12 passages, the original Sumerian notation set next to the modern translation, the astronomical references the scribe gives down to the constellation he names, I put it all into a written document. It is linked below, and the QR code is on your screen. Now let us continue. Sumerian cosmology was not a vague spiritual system. It was a structured model of the universe, with specific levels, specific boundaries, and specific inhabitants for each level. The earth, called Ki, was flat. Below the earth was the Apsu, the freshwater abyss, ruled by Enki. Above the earth was the air, called Lil, ruled by Enlil. Above the air was the dome of heaven, called An, which was both the name of the sky and the name of the highest god, who lived above it. And above the dome, according to the oldest texts, were the waters of the upper sea. The Hebrews would later inherit this cosmology almost intact. The book of Genesis describes a firmament dividing the waters above from the waters below. That phrasing did not come from nowhere. It came from a Sumerian source older than the Hebrew text by at least 1,000 years. What modern readers tend to miss is how seriously the Sumerians took the physical reality of these layers. They were not symbols. They were measured. The priests recorded the angle at which stars rose and set. They calculated the daily motion of the moon. They predicted eclipses. They built ziggurats that aligned to specific points on the horizon. This was an empirical culture. When they wrote that there was an ocean above the dome, they were not engaged in mysticism. They were stating what they believed to be a fact about the structure of the cosmos, the same way they stated facts about the flooding of the Tigris. So the question becomes, what did they think they were seeing? Because something gave them this idea. Cultures do not invent specific cosmologies for no reason. The Sumerians did not look up at a clear blue sky and decide for entertainment that an ocean lived above it. They had a reason. The tablets tell us what that reason was. The reason was the things that swam in it. Across multiple Sumerian fragments, not just CVS 11572, the same imagery appears. Beings that move through the upper sky. Beings that are not gods, not stars, not clouds, not birds. Beings that the scribes give a separate name to. The name is rendered in different ways depending on the dialect, but the most common form is Lamu, a word that later gets absorbed into the Babylonian creation epic as the name of a primordial deity. In the older Sumerian texts, however, Lamu is not a god. Lamu is a category. It is what you call the things in the upper waters. The word itself carries the meaning hairy or shaggy, but in context, it refers to something with a textured outer surface, something that is not smooth like a star and not flat like a cloud. A second word appears alongside Lamu in 3 known tablets. The word is Kishar, and its meaning is harder to pin down. It seems to refer to the largest of the creatures, the ones the scribes describe as long-bodied and serpentine. There is a tradition in Babylonian art, inherited from Sumerian sources, of depicting enormous serpent forms moving through the sky. The Mushushu, the great dragon of Marduk, is one of these. Modern scholars treat the Mushushu as a mythological invention, but the earliest references to it describe it not as a beast on earth, but as a thing in the heavens, a thing that crosses the dome. The translations get cleaned up over time. By the time these stories pass through Babylonian editing, Assyrian copying, and finally modern translation into European languages,
I'm sorry, y'all.
the strangeness has been
That's
smoothed
boring
into
as
something
fuck.
that reads like mythology. But if you go back to the oldest layers, the Sumer,
I want to hear that. Too late for the mythology shit. This shit real. Man, I hate that took me off that other one. So we all hybrids. And made in a laboratory experimented on, majority of us. And the ones Inky made. And there are, that's what I say about melanated, no, not melanated, white skin. Okay. So we all here. So that's the truth now. We find out the truth, right? Trying to see if there's anything else we need to see. I want y'all to share with me, look at what I'm looking at. What's the Council of 9? I don't want to see nothing they're going to tell me that's stupid. That was the solar system. Okay, let's look at this. I would love to look at this. I don't know. Let's see. Let's go back and see. Ancient beasts. That was up? Oh yeah, that was up looking at. Eyes wide shut, the Dark Princess prayer. Alright, the God who spoke the universe.
In the beginning, before light touched the earth and before the Nile carved its memory into the desert, there was Ptah, not merely a deity. In the beginning, before light touched the earth and before the Nile carved its memory into the desert, there was Ptah, not merely a deity spoken of in distant
So we still gonna have the prejudice thing going on when I let everybody come here?
The architect whose thought shaped reality and whose word set the cosmos in motion. Long before the Greeks formed the idea of logos, before the Abrahamic faiths declared, "Let there be light," the people of Kemet already knew that the universe manifested through consciousness and speech, a truth preserved in temple walls and papyrus scrolls that testified not to superstition, but to a deep metaphysical science. Ptah was not imagined. Ptah was understood. His priests described him as the heart that conceives and the tongue that commands. And from that divine union sprang the Netjeru, the stars, the earth, and every living form. To speak of Ptah is to speak of the African origin of philosophy, architecture, mathematics, and moral law, a story often silenced or appropriated, yet carved eternally in stone. This film does not merely retell mythology. It reclaims a memory stolen by kingdoms that built their glory upon African foundations. To witness Ptah is to witness the moment consciousness awakened to itself. The moment sound became substance. The moment Africa gave the world its first creation story. And so, we begin not with magic, but with mind, not with myth, but with memory, returning to Kemet, the Black Land, to rediscover the voice that spoke existence into being. Ptah rises from Memphis, known in the ancient tongue as Ineb-Hej, capital of the Old Kingdom and heart of sacred craftsmanship. But older still is the African cosmology from which he emerges, a worldview that never separated matter from spirit, or God from creation, or maker from made. Unlike later invasive cultures that divided the divine from the world of men, Ta was present in clay, in stone, in breath, in language, in architecture, in every expression of art and technology. Archaeology confirms that Memphis stood as one of the oldest organized urban centers, a cradle where priest architects codified geometry, sound, metallurgy, agriculture, and statecraft into a unified philosophical system rooted in Ma'at. Western academia once attempted to deny Africa its genius, but papyri, temple reliefs, and the Shabaka stone silence all doubt. The theology of Ptah is the earliest recorded metaphysical model of creation through thought. Before Plato spoke of forms, before Aristotle defined motion, before Heraclitus conceptualized logos, Africa already articulated the principle that mind precedes matter. In Nubia and Kemet, divinity was not distant. It was embedded within human potential, a concept modern science echoes in quantum theory and vibrational physics. The priests of Memphis understood that Ptah was not simply one god among many, but the primordial consciousness from which all other Nejeru emerged. The original architect who existed before existence itself took form. His name appears in the oldest texts, carved into stone when the world was still learning to remember itself. And his temple in Memphis became the beating heart of a civilization that would gift humanity with writing, medicine, astronomy, and engineering. To return to Ta is to return to the African blueprint of consciousness itself. To understand that what the West calls philosophy was already ancient when Greece was still in its infancy. The continuity between Nubia, Kemet, and the cultures of Inner Africa reveals a truth that colonialism desperately tried to erase, that African peoples carried within them a sophisticated understanding of reality, a science of the mind and spirit that predated all others. Memphis was not just a political capital. It was a spiritual laboratory where the laws of creation were studied, codified, and passed down through generations of initiates who understood that to build a temple was to participate in the work of Ta himself. The city's very layout reflected cosmic order, its streets and structures aligned with celestial movements, its workshops and studios producing art that was never mere decoration, but always sacred technology. When archaeologists excavate Memphis today, they find evidence of a sophistication that challenges every racist assumption about ancient Africa. They find precision that rivals modern engineering, artistic mastery that has never been surpassed, and written records that prove beyond doubt that African minds were contemplating the deepest questions of existence while other civilizations were still emerging from prehistory. Ptah represents the African gift to humanity, the understanding that we are not separate from creation, but active participants in it, that our thoughts shape reality, that our words carry power, that consciousness itself is the fundamental substance of the universe. This was not primitive superstition. This was advanced metaphysics. And it came from Africa. The Shabaka stone, inscribed during the 25th dynasty by the Nubian pharaohs who sought to preserve sacred memory from decay, reveals that Ptah created not through labor, but through consciousness. First by conceiving existence with the heart, then manifesting it through speech. This is not metaphor. It is metaphysics. The heart in Kemet was the seat of intelligence and moral reflection, not mere emotion. The tongue was not flesh. It was frequency, vibration, the mechanism through which the invisible becomes visible. Thus Ta represents the unity of mind and word, source and manifestation, thought and form. Every nature emerged through this process, meaning that even gods such as Atum, Ra, Sekhmet, and Het Heru originate from Ta's thinking. In this cosmology, sound is the engine of reality. Modern physics speaks.
I'm gonna stop this, y'all, because I want to see some more beings, some more extraterrestrials. not about one race, it's about a lot, right? I would love to know who mine is. Um, I spell extraterrestrial, and I've been spelling it all the time. Now I can't spell it. EX. EXTRA. T E E South Sea. Extraterrestrial. Damn. Let me put one E. Extra terrestrial. So I might butcher that.
Roll back. So you want?
Oh, okay. Is that the same video?
Northern Tool and Equipment. Get serious.
Let me see.
Honey?
Hmm?
I have a friend with benefits.
What?
A friend.
Roll back. So you want to know about the extraterrestrials, yeah? This seems to be a very popular topic at the moment.
Okay, let's see.
You're asking that question about Yakub, the big head scientist. That is such a big story that I think I'm going to read some stuff because it's a very big story, right? So you can find that story for those who have the Holy Tablets, right? In chapter 16, the Underworld. That's the chapter. The name of the chapter is chapter 16, the Underworld. And you can see a picture there of the Donakil. Now, I'm going to read some information. The best book really that goes into the details of the Yakub story is the book called Shambhala and Agatha, Cities Within, right? The Cities Within. Because the planet Earth is hollow, right? And there's a diagram called the Hollow Earth. But that diagram explains about how the planet is hollow. And when we say hollow, there are actually caverns. So depending on how far you're digging down into the center of the Earth, there are caverns on the way. And that map called the Hollow Earth, you can Google it and see it. There are caverns in between, not right in the center, but like in between as you're going down. Many, many different caverns. And those caverns have been there for a long time. And you have different extraterrestrials that live there. And the Donakil, who I've shown a picture of, is one of those beings. Then you have like the Duanis. Yeah, the Duanis, they look like that. They're like porcupine beings. They are very smart. You have the Teros. Yeah, the Teros, they look like that. These are like the cone head that you would have seen in like Star Trek and certain movies that depict these different beings. But the Earth has a grid system, right, as you can see there. There's so much information. I'm just building up to then go into that story of Yakub, because Yakub, who's referred to as the big head scientist, he came about as a product of a mixture between the Donakil and the Teros. So yeah, that whole chapter, if you read the Underworld, chapter 16 in the Holy Tablets goes into it, and the book Shambhala and Agatha, Cities Within, that goes into more detail. But what I'm going to do is, again, from even the Melaninite children, which is scroll number 133, that goes into, so what I'm going to do is just read an excerpt and then talk about Yaqub. All right, so the question on page 43 says descendants of the Deros, right? It shows you that the Deros, which I didn't mention, but they're like the obese looking types of beings. But then there's a question. You mentioned two other groups of beings earlier, the Donakil, right? I'm going to write some of the words that are quite hard to maybe know. So the Donakil and the Terror, yeah? When we say Terror, we put the plural and we say Teros, yeah? But it's Terror. Who are they? The answer is the Donakil, whose original home is in the 8th planet, Risk. Right? So the name of the planet is Risk. This is where our master teacher comes from as well, right? It says the 8th planet Risk of the 19th galaxy, Ilion. Ilion is I-double-L-Y-U. Ilion, right? That's the name of the galaxy. Have an abundance of melanin in their skin, for they are related to your forefathers, the woolly-haired beings, those who bear 9 ether, the Anunnaki, right? Again, remember, these terms, this is when he was still teaching us the Sumerian doctrine and the terms that were being used, such as Anunnaki or Elohim, which we obviously know there are different species, and we know them as the Parnatharu today, all right? They're descendants of us, all right, who are the Shuyuk. The Shuyuk, that's spelled S-H-U-Y U-K-H. The Shuyuk, these are the elders, right? The elders, the Riskians. It says, we left some of our hybrids on this very planet Earth. They are your Donakil. They took up residence within Shambhala, right? So remember when I'm saying that book's called Shambhala, which actually means centered by Allah, depending on which language you're using to translate that word, Shambhala. And that's the book I was referring to. Okay. The center of the earth is a special base controlled by the Donakil. And just like the melanin-bearing beings of the Watusi of the planet Earth, Watusi of the planet Earth, the Donakil too are tall. See, the Donakil are related to what most people know as the Dongala. We'll come back to that. Right, so the Donakil have very large craniums, meaning that they have very large heads, right? The Terror are also a group of benevolent beings who lived in the adjacent cavern to the Donakil. The Tsunamins or Terror, which is the word Terror is short for integrative or constructive, are a subsurface race that usually keep the Terror in check. In order for the Terror to keep their sanity, they bore further into the earth. However, due to the crossbreeding, the Terror took on different forms, and others look so human they can come to the surface and not be noticed. Okay, so it goes on, and he says, from the pictures, it appears as if they have oriental features. And then the master teacher, Panabhadyan, says, allow me to explain. A lot of mixing in took place in the heaven, or what you refer to as the heaven. Actually, the Terror comes from a planet called Jomon. So the Terror comes from a planet called Jomon. Jomon. Right? Jomon. In the star constellation called the Red Giant, or the 4th brightest star, simply called AQUARIUS. Again, you can find AQUARIUS in the Bible. If you look at Job 9:9, Amos 5:8, you can find the mention of these constellations. So AQUARIUS, which is the Boot constellation, The atmosphere on
So
Jamon
yeah, I knew the Bible
contributed to
was full
their
of
children's breathing
extraterrestrials.
defects as
I
well
knew
as
that.
congenital heart disease and poor digestive system, unstable immune systems, and are more likely to get leukemia. So people of the planet Earth normally have 46 chromosomes. However, because the Terrors have 48 chromosomes, their structure is so different. When mixed with certain humans, it resulted in a defect called Down syndrome, right? So, you know, Down syndrome from different races, they have the same traits, where the individual, right, has 47 chromosomes. So, because of the 46 chromosomes of the humans and the 48 chromosomes of the Terrors, you know, you get individuals that come out and they have 47 chromosomes, and this is where the result of Down syndrome comes from. And it can be found in any race on the planet Earth. Just as the Terror has many races, the Terror that have an abundance of melanin in their skin are descendants of the Shiyuk. And those that lack melanin are the descendants of the Flugerod, right? So the Flugerod are a species of Europeans, if you want to look at that, use that term, that came before the Canaanites. Yeah, from Canaan. These were like 2,400 years before the Canaanites or the Canaanites, and they were 8,400 years before, right? So they would have been 8,400 years ago, whereas the Canaanites are dealing with 6,000 years ago. So that's why 2,400 difference in terms of the time. Okay, so let's carry on. So it says that of the Shuk, and those that lack melanin are the descendants of the Flugerods, or the Halabines, or Hulu. Question: you say the Terror who have melanin in their skin are descendants of the Shuyuk, and those that lack melanin are the descendants of the Flugerods. Do you mean that the two tribes mixed in, or are they a product of one or the other, as in the case of the Adamites? The answer says the chief of the Donatu called Rabboni Fukwa. Let me just write that name down. So the chief of the Donatu, his name is F-U-Q-W-R, right? So the chief of the Donatu, that's his name, and he's the black seed, married a Terror, a brown seed chieftain's daughter named Lucianus, right? Lucianus. So that's an L. Right. So he married the brown seed chieftain's daughter named Lucianus against her will. This is where the whole story of Jacob starts from, right? So against her will, just to establish peace in the caverns. For the Donatu were being attacked by the Dero. The Dero, those are the obesity looking ones, right? So they were being attacked by the Deros. The Terror was supposed to keep the Deros under check, in control, but they were being attacked by them, and they were very violent and destructive and aggressive. So the tribe wanted to bring about a peaceful coexistence. Thus, the chief of the Terror, whose name is Lamsa, the chief of the Terror, Lamsa. Okay, so because of wanting to bring about peace, what they decided to do is Lamsa gave his daughter to Fuqua, who is the chief of the Donakil. So he gave the daughter so that they can marry, and his daughter's name was Radia. Yeah, Radia. Spell her name. Radia.
Imagine you are like them. Strains happen, and sniffles, and sometimes, who knows? That's why Houston Methodist has primary care near you. A network of specialists right in your corner, and same-day clinics or virtual care at the ready. So you can keep doing it all. That's the difference between practicing medicine and leading it. For you. Houston Methodist. Leading medicine.
Now at McDonald's, you can choose your study meal or even your drive-through dinner with McValue.
Get more choices, like a $5.50 hot and spicy meal deal.
I just asked my mom, can I get Cash App?
You're letting them be independent, but if I need to check, I can.
Right, so he gave his daughter Radia to Lamsa, chief of the Teros, to marry his oldest son named Hatif. The question is, did Lucianus have any children by Fuqua? The answer is no. Lucianus bore Fuqua no children. She, by shadow hour, left the caverns and went to the surface and sought out Fuqua's brother. Fuqua's brother's name was Yishak. People say, it became Isaac, but Yishak, or Yishuk. She sought out Fuqua's brother, Yishak, and Yishak lived in the best part of the planet, the enclosed garden. She was welcomed by him, who hated his twin brother. So Yishak's twin brother was Fuqua, and he hated him. All right, so Yishak, even though he knew it was wrong to take Lucianus as his own, he did. So that's the picture of Fuqua, and I'm going to carry on. Like I said, it's a build-up to the story of Yaqub, and it's very important to know this background. And that's Lamsa from the Terror, all right? And I'll show you a picture of how this is all of them. So you have, that's Yishak, Lucianus, the mother of Yaqub, this is where it's getting to. And then this is Radia, the daughter of Fuqua. And then you have the son, Hatif, right? Who was originally supposed to marry her, but obviously she ran away. And then now we get into the meat of it. This is the picture of the big head scientist known as Yaqub, which became Jacob, and in other stories that pick up. So the question goes on, it says, were they the only two children? No, Fuqua and Yishak had 5 other brothers named
no, that's not
Hassan, Rama,
the children gonna be
and
named it.
Tunda. All save the first 2 stayed within the caverns. But Amo, who was also a runaway, he lived 20 miles outside of the enclosed garden at the site where the bodies of Adam and Eve are buried, called Mount Arafat. There was originally a village within which an illegitimate birth between Yishak, his brother Fuqa's wife, Lucianus, occurred. Okay, so this is where, carrying on with the story, Lucianus was mad at her father, Lamsa, for giving her away because she wanted to marry a terror like herself.
It sounds like Louisiana.
Because she was angry, she had a child by Yishak, the disagreeable, yet reformed brother of Fuqua. She did this so that the child would be of no benefit to her tribe. Many thought him unpleasant to look at. This is why. Now it's going into this is the story of Yaqub. Yaqub, who was born hydrocephalic, having the head twice the size of his tribe members, the Donacul and the Teros. Because of it, by no fault of his own, he got much attention. Because he had the head the size of 2 men. When he grew up, many referred to him as the big head scientist. Right? So he was scorned, mocked. Thus he wanted to get revenge on his people. He owed his peculiar appearance to the fact that he was mixed for the Teros, right? Because the Teros have that kind of like, the cone head. Yeah, so the Teros look like that with the cone heads. Yeah, and then you had obviously the Donacul, they had just round heads, but he came out with 2 brains. So they already had big heads anyway. So the mixture of these 2 made him look different. But his wife,
I'm right.
Lucianus, was herself disagreeable from the tribe of agreeable Teros, who had a dome-shaped skull. This combination produced the unsightful Yaqub. The Teros lived in an adjacent cavern to the Donaculs. The terror Lucianus refused to stay amongst the Donacules, for she was always teased about her cone-shaped head, thus she came to the surface to seek out the surface Donacule. And this surface-dwelling Donacule brother of her husband, Ishak, was abstract-looking among surface dwellers, for his cranium was extremely large. This mixture gave birth to Yakub, yet they were the wisest of the wise in that land. They referred to them simply as the aliens because of their contact with the Pleiadians. Not only did her son have a head the size of two men, but two brains, both activated by visitors from both the Aldebaran and the Pleiades. His name was called Yakub, who was also known as Yakub, son of Ishak. He is also known as Yakub, as well as Yakub Har, or Yakub El. He is known as Bar Yishok. His mother's name was Lucianus, the terror of the original tribe of Lunarians, who came to this planet and lived beneath the surface. She was not in agreement with Terror marrying Donacule for political reasons. Rebellion being weak and wicked, her trials and tribulations led to her desire to destroy men. She did not know that this was prophesied by the wise 24 scientists called the Magus, or the Magi, who by the stars charted this birth 8,400 years before it actually happened. He was born in his uncle's name was Ammon. Okay, let's carry on. So, yeah, in his uncle Ammon's house, right? That was his uncle Ammon's house, located 20 miles outside of Becca. He returned at age 5, determined to create a new people and teach them to rule for 6,000 years. Now, this is how he got his revenge, right? Or tried to get his revenge. What really happened was this became the opportune time for disagreeable Pleiadians to tap into his brains and inspire an unsightly thing. He was led to have faith that he could create a race of people that would rule over his own people and then the whole planet. The people around him that got ear of his diabolical plan would ask him, will these people be wicked and warlike? He simply answered, only I know that answer, you do not. He knew that he would be their God. The question is asked, when did all of this take place? Answer, he got his idea 8,400 years ago BC. The process would take 600 years, which would take him to the year 7,800 BC. Yet the cursed seed of Canaan, as I said before, that would manifest 6,600 BC according to their history. So he said, was this a creation of a new being? Yes, this God, Yakub, created his own Adam in his image and after his likeness. In the image of a human being, and wicked and weak-minded, overcome with jealousies and envy. He was born with a complex of inferiority and to subject the world to their wish of superiority. A new man, a kind of man, simply mankind. The hidden meaning was in the real name, Patmos. 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 That was the hidden name, right? The place of my own killing. That is Patmos. In the Aegean Sea. That is in Greece, where this mad scientist, Yakub, was to create a new race to destroy his own people and himself. Yet he died at age 150 and never saw the completion of his creation. They were all to be healthy, strong, and good breeders. How was the new being going to be created? Okay, so Yakub made the Flugerods by genetic splicing called grafting. They were called Jews, which became Jews later, called Jacobites, to show forth his power and his wisdom, declaring himself the righteous, and he could make a people.
Go back.
Yakub made the Flugerods by genetic splicing called grafting. They were called Jews, which became Jews later, called Jacobites, to show forth his power and his wisdom, declaring himself the righteous, and he can make a people genetically and mentally weak to give them the power to rule. Then he intended to eliminate them to show and prove that he is God, always was and always will be. So then what happened to his parents during this time? At the age of 5 years old, Jacob was left parentless. His mother, Lucianus, overcome by grief at the remembrance of her home, Shambhala, died. His father, Yishuk, was put to death for violating the sacred oath of the Donakil by marrying Fukuas, his brother's wife. This further outraged Jacob, of course, because he was already deranged. However, Jacob had started school at the age of 4, and by age 6, Jacob was living with his uncle Amo, right? With his uncle Amo, the brother of his father, Yishwak, who himself, many years before, was cast from Shambhala for disagreeable activity. Thus, he also took residence on the surface of the earth. Jacob was living with his uncle Amo in his home 20 miles outside of Becca. So then he goes on. Why did he start school so young? Don't forget, Jacob had 2 activated brains. He was fascinated by magnetism. Yeah. At the age of 18, Jacob had already finished all of the schools of learning in his day and time. This is where Jacob was to convert the people needed for the breeding of his new race. And this is where the Nation of Islam kind of pick up about his uncle and the magnetism, right? So this was where Jacob was to convert the people needed for the breeding of his new race, in the task of making a disagreeable, wicked, and physically weak being with the ability to rule with a special kind of reverse knowledge. So in the making of this new breed of people, he would use his own genes, being he was from an original black and brown germ, the black germ from his blood, the blood of the Donakil, and the brown germ from his blood, the blood of the Terror, who had mixed with the Pleiadians long ago. For his master plan, he needed to convert loyal followers that would obey him regardless of who or what. This was executed by the loyal ones. Before this secret project could begin, there must be a great many people converted to his beliefs. So first, he traveled 20 miles inland from his uncle's house to the holy site where the tree of knowledge did sit. There he started to preach in the streets of Becca, again making such host of converts that the authorities, increasingly concerned, finally exiled him. He and a small band of his followers, the doctors, the nurses, and the cremators, crossed northward up and over the Jordan and over to Egypt, where they took ships into the Aegean Sea to await the arrival of his guinea pigs. He died of a brain tumor and an aneurysm at age 150. One brain exploded and killed him. That's before they arrived on the journey, right? So he died before then. But his scientists were prepared. The other scientists of his day said it couldn't be done. He departed, for they planned a plan to kill him and exile his followers. However, those who supported his undertakings prepared the greatest fleet of ships to sail. Haggai, with 59,999 followers, sailed on a journey for a home in Africa, there to stay for 50,000 years or until the new cycle. The journey took him and the prophet Jacob's followers completely around the continent. So they went around the continent of Africa. All right, and then, but not before there was a great falling away and dissatisfaction amongst his Jacob's followers. They docked along the shores of Africa. The original name of Africa was Nubia. They often mixed up the name Kuthites with the name Cushites. Remember, the Cushites are where the Adam and Eve story in terms of Lilith and his father comes from, and then you have the Cushites as opposed to the Cushites being Nekabe's family, the Tar and the Nat. They were mixed, the Cushites were mixed Hindus, because remember that Adam has, when you see him, he has like straight wavy hair. When Hindus having straight hair, 6 ether, these are the original black man called the Asiatic black man. Again, you can see how this is all tying into the story of diversion from the Nation of Islam. Not to be mistaken with the incarnated gods who already lived in Africa and had woolly hair, 9 ether. All along the coast, the people had black skin and straight hair, but the woolly-haired people of that land refused to mix with them, the law of Nuwapu. They supplanted themselves on the seashores of Mother Africa, mixing in and taking control. These black-skinned and straight-haired tribes never ventured into the heart of Africa, but controlled the ports and the seacoast, and fathered the slave trade, right, of the woolly-haired from Zanzibar. So when you're talking about the people say the slave trade was by black people, it was originally by these black, straight-haired 6 ether beings. All right. So given the slave the original name Zinji. When you hear the name Zinji, Zinji. Right, so that name Zinji, that was before the word Negro. Alright? Okay, so Nubians failed to realize, or today we say that black people failed to realize that through slavery your minds were stripped of the knowledge of what you did have, and this was done through one type of people, the ones that call themselves the Jews, right, today, Jacobites. So the question is asked, is it true that the Pearl Jew was the first to start the slave trade in the New World? Answer, this is quite true. Jews who came over with Christopher Columbus returned with Native American to sell in Spain as slaves. Many of these Jews employed non-Jewish slave traders and dealers. The Pearl Jews were the largest dealers of slaves. And it shows a picture of Christopher Columbus. Where do the British and the Dutch come into the slave trade? Answer, Jews will be Jews whether they live in England, Holland or Israel. As mentioned before, some Jews employed the non-Jewish British, Spanish and Dutch as captains of ships and for other tasks. But the Jews were the kings of the slave trade. Do not think that slavery started all of a sudden on the continent of Africa. Slavery had existed in Africa and the Middle East since ancient times. Then the Jews, not Israelites, had begun the trade. It took a turn for the worse. For centuries, Jews had a hard time starting the slave trade in Africa because even though the Pearl Man had guns, he didn't have a match to the strength and the fighting skills of the African foreparents and their simple weapons. Yeah, that's a story for another video, but we're going to just focus on the Yaqub story, right? Because, like I said, it's a very complex story, and unfortunately, you have to just listen through it because there's a lot. Right, so people, the question is asked, it appears that because we were enslaved during the slavery and so forth, that the Pearl race, the graftation, Yaqub's graftation was successful. And the master answers and he says, let me ask you a question. Why would you think it was a success? Because the things the Pearl Man has done to Nubians will explain their wickedness. And if Yaqub was successful with grafting a weak and wicked being, then he succeeded. By virtue of that fact, the Pearl Man is weak genetically because he lacks melanin, and wicked because of all he has done, and is still doing to other people. You are becoming racist again. I'm trying to break that spell. Nubians, or as a new being, you must take on the responsibility for your own actions. Remember that these Asiatic black men are the descendants of the Hindu, right? The demons of the Hindu, with black skin and straight hair, who had a dissatisfied nature. Evil dwelled within them. So the evil was already there. it was by the grace of their wise scientists who met with the elders of the Donakil did they decide to try to graft the evil out of their nature. The ultimate result was the Flugerods. The Flugerods came out of this genetic splicing and graftation in an attempt to remove their disagreeable side. For the evil lived within these Asiatic black men, the original Hindus, since their evil ancestors came to the planet 60 and 6 billion years ago. These Hindus are the ones who converted to Yaqub's plan. While living in Arabia, they became the tribe called Sheshbaza. This is, again, you can see the tying into the story of the nation. So Sheshbaza, B-Z-Z-A-R, right? Okay, so yeah, they became known as the tribe called Sheshbaza, the 13th tribe known as the lost tribe of Shabazz. So this is where the word Shabazz, again, tying into the nation of Islam's teaching. All right, so named after Sheshbaza, the scientist who carried out the graftation for this weak and wicked beings of Yaqub. And there's a picture of him there. You can see that there. That's him, Sheshbaza. All right, so let's carry on. So many of the followers of Yaqub, because remember that he died, he didn't actually live to see his mission of grafting these beings, but his scientists that were loyal, that followed him, they carried on with the experiment, which took over a period of 600 years, and many died as it was going along the coast. Anyway, many of the followers of Yaqub got lost on the way. Those that survived the journey around Africa were used in the grafting and making of this new race. For any baby, this is how he did it, right? Actually, for any babies that were born with black genes, he put a pin through their brain. Then the next was the brown. They were spared to breed, so they made the red. Then the red, the yellow, and then from the yellow, the pearl. And the question is, how long did this take? Answer, this process took 600 years of grafting and separating. Thus, Yaqub's nation was born. A ruler was set over them. She was called Europa. That's spelled, as Europe, but Europa, EU, Europa. Right? That was the ruler that was set over them. So this Europa was the empress of the land. Yet without guidance, they regressed and took refuge in a place called Pelion. I-O-N. Pelion. Right? That is the Isles of Patmos. Just right here. All right, so then on up into the mountain region of Thessaly, and in the grotto, or grotti meaning caves, they conquered and enslaved the original inhabitants of that land, then called Yunnan. These savage beasts that were grafted from the Asiatic Hindu black men were nothing more than the original blonde-haired, blue-eyed, pale-skinned, melanin-lacking, grafted, disagreeable, rebellious seed of Yaqub, the mad scientist. Shameless, moralless, hair covering 3/4 of their bodies from ankle to shoulder, the beast of the field, also called Behemoth. They walked on all fours and ate flesh raw, having bestiality acts. Thus the dog was the best friend. And it says, why is the dog considered to be man's best friend? And it goes on to say, because they allowed the dog to lick their leprous sores, and to this day will allow them to sleep in their beds, eat off their plates, and even lick them in the mouth. The outcome of the graftation was the Flugerods, bred by mixing in the seed of the Pleiadians, which is blonde hair and blue eye, mixing and grafting from the genes of the Asiatic black straight-haired and black-skinned and black-eyed Hindus, grafting from the brown germ to the red germ to the yellow germ onto the new earth-bred Flugerods, also breeding the abstract black-skinned and blue-eyed being. Yeah, so, the story goes on and on and on, and I'm going to try and cut it short, but just to tie it all up in a nutshell, we're saying that this person that people are calling Yakub, or the big head scientist, he came about by way of two different races that were living in the caverns in the world known as Shambhala, where you have many beings that coincide and live there. You had the Dero, who are the obese looking, and you had the Teros, which are the kind of like cone head looking beings, and they were always fighting each other. But the Teros were supposed to really keep the Deros in check, because the Deros are very aggressive, unruly, etc. Now, because of war going on between them all the time, the Donakil, they sought to have peace by mixing in with the Teros. And so what they did was, gave a daughter from one tribe to the other, and that daughter wasn't happy because she wanted to marry amongst her own, which were Teros, right? The cone-shaped ones. And so she ran away. But so the mixture, the child that was born between her and the leader's brother, Fukwa brother, who was Ishaq, they produced this child that was a mixture of the Donakil, who had big heads, and the Teros, who had the cone heads. And what happened was that Yaqub was the result of that birth. And because he had a big head, because he had two brains, and he was being teased by both sides, ridiculed, and he wasn't happy about it. So that there was an influence by the Pleiadians who could actually telepathically influence him by controlling his brain. He was very intelligent, obviously, because he had two brains. He finished school early, and because he was constantly being teased and ridiculed, he said he's going to create a being that was weak and wicked so that he will get his revenge and to prove to them that he was the god, because his plan was to create these beings and then kill them off after to show that he had control over them. Now, it wasn't just overnight, because the whole plan was to take his genes and his blood and to produce offspring, which would have come from the Donakil, being the melaninated beings, and obviously with the Teros, who would produce the brown germ. And then to take that, so what happened is all the children that were born, when they came, remember, this was done over a period of 600 years. Once he had to get followers, he had to basically build a crowd by preaching his doctrine and people that followed him. And he got ships, and he loaded his ships with his followers to go on this journey. And what he was doing was, throughout that period, he was doing this breeding of taking the dark to the brown, and then the brown to the yellow, and then the yellow to the red, then to the pale. But how he did that was every child that was born that was dark, he would get rid of. Then the brown would then produce children, and then so on and so forth. So basically, if you kind of look at it if you look at how Michael Jackson was, where he was dark, he had a big head, big nose, big lips, dark skin, and over a period of time, he went from being dark to light. He went from having a big nose to a straight nose, big lips to thin lips, and basically transformed. So you can go from black to what people consider white or pale, but you can't go the other way around. So anyway, people were dying along the journey, and this journey took 600 years. He himself died along the journey because one of his brains exploded. So he didn't make it to see the end result. But however, he had loyal scientists that knew of his plan of what he was trying to achieve, and they actually completed that. And this would be what people call them Jews today, but they were originally Khazars. And if you study the Jews, you have two sects, the Sephardim and the Ashkenazim, which are descendants of these Khazars. And so the word Jew, as we have broken or I break down all the time, is because they try to tie into the tribe. Loyal scientists that knew of his plan of what he was trying to achieve, and they actually completed that. And this would be what people calling Jews today, but they were originally Khazars. And if you study the Jews, you have two sects, the Sephardim and the Ashkenazim, which are descendants of these Khazars. And so the word Jew, as we have broken or break down all the time, is because they try to tie in Ashkenazim, which are descendants of these Khazars. And so the word Jew, as we have broken or I break down all the time, is because they try to tie into the tribe of what they say Yehuda or Yehudi. That's what they say Jews are, and that will go to the tribe of Judah of the 12 tribes. Well, 13 if you include the female, but they're not the original tribe of Judah. They play on the word Judah with Jew, but they're from the what we call the Jacobites or the Jebusites, from the son Jebus. But anyway, so that Yaqub story, as I've explained, is the same story that the Nation of Islam told, as you saw, because the person that was over that land, Shesh Bazar, is who they call Shabazz, where they say the tribe of Shabazz. And they refer to, if you look at the nation's teachings, as the original Asiatic black man. This is why in Wusabat we explained that we're not the original Asiatic black man. That's referring to the East Indians who are, although they are black, they're dark, they have straight hair. And our unique trait on the planet as Nagaru or Negro is woolly 90 for hair. So that's where they had the information of the story, but it got mixed up. And then in the Bible, in the biblical stories, they tell you about the story of, Jacob and Esau and how the birthright was stolen. And, that's a whole different story. But, yeah, so this Yaqub that people keep asking about, this is how he came about, by these extraterrestrial descendants that lived in the inner world, or the caverns in the inner world called Shambhala, where you find many other beings that have been here for millions of years that have descendants on the planet. So when you look at everyone on the planet today, all the races, yeah, you will have the original forefathers who came from some other constellations, other planets, dwelled here in the caverns. Some of them remained in the caverns and don't come up to the surface, and others came up to the surface. So, like we talk about the Donakil, which ties into the Dangalaba, or the tribes in Nuba today, which refer to that, and that ties into the Watusi tribe. And then you have the other side, which is the Pataites, which ties into Nikeba and her parents, Anath and Patah. So that's the black. And then you have like these cone-head beings that come from Jomon, right? From Jomon. These are where the Orientals, if you look at like the Chinese, they kind of look like them with, the features, and those are from Jomon. Then you look at people on the planet that are very obese, like they have a lot of weight. I'm not talking about people that just have weight, but the ones that are really obese to the point where they can't lose weight. That's because they have their genetics tied into these Deros, right? And so everyone on the planet has some link to these extraterrestrials by way of their descendants in the caverns. And some people have something called hirsutism. This ties into those Duanis that we spoke about, or the shaggy beings that you will find in ancient Sumeru, Enkidu, for example. Because when you look at the epics of Gilgamesh, his best friend was called Enkidu. And those Enkiduites are those hairy beings. So all the biblical stories, all the people on the planet, they relate or tie back into these extraterrestrials in some way.
What did you say?
With Enkidu, for example, because when you look at the epics of Gilgamesh, his best friend was called Enkidu, and those Enkiduites are those hairy beings. So all the biblical stories, all the people on the planet, they relate or tie back into these extraterrestrials in some way, shape or form. And Yaqub's story is just one of those strange stories that got passed over and remixed, but it literally comes from him being, this birth between, two different people. We talked about the Down syndrome as well, which is, the terrorists mixing in with people on the planet to produce, we have 46 chromosomes, 23 chromosomes from your mum, 23 chromosomes from your father, giving you the 46. But with the mixture, with their having 48 chromosomes, produces 47 chromosomes, which is what produces Down syndrome. And that's on every race. So if you look at a black, a white, an Asian person who has Down syndrome, they all have the same features. This is why it literally just goes back down to the DNA and the chromosome. So I hope that's helped. It's a long story, but I hope that's giving.
They say he disappeared. He said he died. Let's see.
The relaxing pheromones of Feel Away Optimum help your cat feel more comfortable and secure at home.
Now Yakub, as we all know, is the father of all white people. He is the Mayo Master, the Cracker Commander, the Albinoid Allfather, who grafted a new race into existence to dominate the world for 6,000 years with the power of technology. But, have you ever stopped to consider who Yakub's father is? Now, if you watch my Yakub video, you might remember the name Wallace Fard Muhammad, the founder of the Nation of Islam and the originator of the oldest known Yakubian mythos. Now, I have a confession to make. In my original Yakub video, I failed to mention that the story there was sort of an amalgamation of a few different Yakub stories, and I completely omitted the second half of the story from my source, where a good version of Yakub, the Jesus is the Yakub Satan, if you will, this Gucci-headed scientist named Yashmal, will appear and undo Yakub's work and bring down the tyranny of the Albinoid technologist world order through the power of his new doctrine, Teachnology, which may or may not be wokeness. Also, all the history I mentioned involving the aliens of the Hollow Earth, the Shiuk and the Sanin, and Yakub's alien parentage were not Fard's work at all, but rather being added and taught later by a man named Malachi, or Dwight, York, another black supremacist. It's a bit of a black supremacist fanfiction going on here. And York is a whole insane rabbit hole unto himself. Trust me, it's nuts. But this is not a Malachi Z. York video. And today, we're only concerned with Mr. W.F. Muhammad, as I found his own existence and life story is just as fascinating as his big-headed, white boy crafting evil scientist mythos. And the man himself is like a shape-shifting ghost in the records of history, appearing and vanishing across records, where he then gave rise to the largest black separatist religious movement in American history, and then vanished completely. It's a really fascinating story, and like all human beings, the story starts at birth. Wallace Fard Muhammad was born in, well, it's unclear exactly where he was born. Anywhere from Mecca to New Zealand to Afghanistan to Pakistan are all theorized to be potential origin points for Yakub's father. Fard himself in NOI tradition claimed that Fard was from Mecca, Saudi Arabia, giving him deep ties to the holy city, a fact that he exploited to teach a new syncretic version of Islam to his black followers. However, this claim is disputed, as there's no solid evidence as to a one Wallace Fard Muhammad ever being born or living near Mecca. In several documents such as census records, marriage certificates, prison records, and even some news articles that may include references to Fard seem to tell a different story. And it also doesn't help that Fard was a big fan of aliases, and it's estimated that he may have used up to 58 annoyingly similar sounding names in his life, which I'll go over after I tell his known story. But for now, let's head to the year 1930. 1930 is a very important year for Fard, as 1930 through 1934 are the only years in which we can confirm where exactly Fard was and what he was doing. After spending most of his life as a mysterious, nameless entity, Fard surfaced in Detroit, Michigan in 1930, where he was first encountered as a door-to-door salesman, selling some curious silks to Detroit's black populations, many of which had only recently arrived there following the Great Migration, where many black families left the southern states between 1910 and 1970, fleeing the brutal Jim Crow-era law-enforced racism and segregation, endless threats of violence from lynch mobs and the KKK, and a lack of economic opportunity in the South, in hopes of a brighter future for themselves and their families in the hopefully less racist and richer North, only to usually find that the residents there wanted less than nothing to do with them, and the opportunities were not much better there either, upgrading from disrespected, underpaid, and oftentimes just straight-up unpaid field workers to disrespected, underpaid factory workers. And that's if the factory even hired black people at the time. It also didn't help that the nation was in the throes of the Great Depression, making any potential money even thinner. During this time, Fard would go door to door, selling Islamic silks to the residents, saying that he himself was a traveler from Mecca, and he would claim that these silks were the same kind that their ancestors used. Meccan ancestors, huh? This was the first step. Now obviously, black Americans are the descendants of African slaves, and their true family history had been long since stamped out and forgotten. But if the families wanted to learn more about this Meccan connection, Fard would offer to come back to teach them more and encourage them to tell all their friends and family about these teachings, and they would gather in their homes to hear what this fella had to say. And Fard himself seemed to have a very powerful aura to him. He was well-groomed and well-dressed in a sleek, tailored suit and fez. He spoke with a unique eloquence, and he seemed more like a fashion model or a foreign dignitary, rather than a humble salesman. And he seemed to have vast knowledge of history and religion, and this aura allowed him to convince many people to hear him out. Fard's initial study sessions began as humble gatherings in the homes of the people he was selling silks to, where despite the clear Islamic slant to himself and his beliefs, Fard would use the Bible, not the Quran, to preach and back up his teachings, as most of the black families that he preached to were only familiar with the Bible. And it seemed that Fard knew his shit, as his congregation only grew from there. And as it did, Fard began to switch up his rhetoric, and began denouncing white people openly, attacking the teachings of the Bible, calling it the poisoned book, and saying that it was the book of the Yacubian white demons, to rile up his supporters to near emotional crisis, preparing them to accept his new teachings more willingly. Fard began teaching a pretty radical form of black exceptionalism and nationalism, a pretty stark contrast from the country's current feelings on race. And this is the 1930s we're talking about. We're in the middle of the era of ascended racism. The Nazis had yet to fully make their rise, and scientific racism and eugenics were pretty popular ideas, even in America. I'm talking about actual skull measuring, forcefully sterilizing people deemed undesirable to have children, and categorizing humans into sub-races with defined ceilings and floors for intelligence and genetically predisposed behavior. Literal, I depicted myself as the Chad Bojack and you as the lumpy soyjack memes that you see 15-year-olds spam on X, but it's all completely genuine. Preaching using both the Bible and Quran, and even quoting passages by early Jehovah's Witnesses, notably the book Deliverance by Judge Franklin Rutherford, when making his speeches. There are a ton of various unique beliefs and practices he preached, but in broad strokes, Fard presented himself as the Mahdi, the Islamic herald of the end times, and the man who would rule the world in the name of Islam and justice. And despite his white appearance, he claimed to be an Asiatic black man, and was born with white features as to better hide and mingle amongst the white albinoid children of Yaqub, and move unseen. Fard taught his followers that white people were the true racial inferiors, on account of their lack of inner divinity and empathy, and the fact that they were the byproduct of an evil science project, grafted from the original black human race by our father Yaqub, and said that black people need to separate themselves completely from these pale demons. He advocated that African Americans start their own businesses, raise families, eat healthy foods, like no meat besides fish, and to avoid drugs and alcohol, which is all generally pretty good advice if you ask me. He was teaching his followers to lead responsible, hardworking, and healthy lives, despite the giga-brain, baby-killing scientist lore holding it all together. Fard also taught his followers that all black peoples were Muslim, and that they had to reject their white slave owner names, like Smith, or Richardson, or Johnson. And instead, they would be given new Muslim names, or he would bestow upon them the X in their name, which stands for the unknown, himself even taking the name Wallace Fard Muhammad sometime later, a practice that's pretty synonymous with the NOI, and made famous by guys like Cassius Clay changing his name to Muhammad Ali, or Malcolm X's change from Malcolm Little to El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, and so on. Now this wasn't a new practice though, and giving new names to followers was done before, most notably by the Moorish Science Temple of America, another black nationalist church that predated the NOI, which is a whole other story unto itself. This is not a Moorish Science Temple of America video. In this practice of giving new names, along with other similarities between Fard's teachings and the MSTs, like both saying that black peoples were Asiatic specifically, as both believed black people to be the original race of man, originating from the Middle East, which they considered to be a part of Asia, and therefore, whites were the true colored peoples, and both temples claimed descent from some lost black Middle Eastern empire of some kind, leading many to believe that Fard was a former member of the Moorish Science Temple, and took strong inspiration and ideas from his time there to craft his mythos. Some even claim that he was indeed a part of the MST, going by the name David Ford L, and he tried to grab power in the temple by claiming to be the reincarnation of the temple's recently deceased founder, a man named Noble Drew Ali, which if this story is true, it didn't seem to work. And from there, Fard continued to grow his congregation, gaining so many new followers from his humble house lessons that he eventually had to teach in shifts. And later his followers pooled their resources, and they were able to rent a Detroit speaking hall to serve as their first temple, even meeting and converting his successor, a man named Elijah Poole, later Elijah Muhammad, the actual most important man in NOI history, which is also another story. He's the man who would expand the NOI to the nationwide organization it would later become. Fard also mostly ditched the Bible in favor of the Quran for his teachings, and his teachings really began to solidify. Now, the original Far to prove that NOI mythology doesn't have ballsack-headed immoral aliens living in the Hollow Earth, but it's still one hell of a tale regardless. And it all starts with Allah. In the beginning, there was nothing. And then Allah formed himself out of nothing, taking the form of a black man after 6 trillion years of grinding and hard work. He then created 24 imams, 24 god scientists who would rule as the god of the universe in cycles. That was, until one of the god scientist imams went rogue. Now, I'm not sure about the exact continuity here, but one story claims that the original human race all lived on the moon. But the moon was destroyed after a, quote, black god scientist got pretty ass mad that all the moon-dwelling peoples didn't all speak the same language. So naturally, he blew up the entire moon with explosives, with one of the fragments of the blown-up moon becoming Earth, where the original 13 tribes of man later emerged. Other versions say that Earth itself was blown up by the planet-destroying terrorist scientist man with dynamite, which exploded so powerfully, a chunk of the Earth got blown off and eventually formed the moon. And then the 13 Arabic-speaking tribes of man that existed on the Earth at the time were all wiped out by this planet-sized bomb. I'm just not sure if the moon blew up and created the Earth, or vice versa. But regardless, all of the tribes were wiped out, except for one, led by a scientist named Shabazz, who had led his tribe of followers from their original home of Mecca, Saudi Arabia, to the unoccupied lands of what we call Africa today. And Shabazz wanted to move his people to this harsher and untamed land because he, quote, wanted the people to undergo a form of life that would make them tough and hard, which transformed them from their original form of a dark-skinned, yet soft and straight-haired people, to how modern people of African descent look today, developing their stiff, afro-textured hair from their time in the harsh jungles of Africa, and surviving the planet-sized...
I can't even listen to that no more. You give me a headache. Oh, God. Alright, y'all. Phone going out. Thanks for listening. Appreciate y'all. Talk to y'all later.